Welcome back after watching the Fiat 126 video. I did that a few days ago. The way that I do these videos is I do the stuff to camera, then I mix it all together, I do all the video editing and put all the images and videos and things on top of it. And while I was doing it, I was noticing down in this corner, it seems dark. And I'm wondering, I'm not quite sure why it's doing that. I've started having a light ring here to try and give myself some more light. Maybe that's offsetting the color bands. That's more than you need to know. Anyway, it was annoying me, this sort of dark spot down here. Anyway, the Fiat 126, I pored over the What Car magazine in the 1980s, looking for the best car with a 0 to 60 time or different things like this. This is how I found that the Citroën BX had, that the diesel one had a 0 to 60 less than 10 seconds, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. But I also found the cheapest car you could possibly buy in the 1980s in Britain was the Fiat 126, and I did consider it. It was something like £2,500 or something like that at the time, and I thought, yeah, I could kind of afford that. Maybe I could buy myself a brand new car. Wouldn't it be really cool? I'm not sure I would really have loved the car too much. But anyway, that's the introduction I had to the Fiat 126, was just sort of almost a top trumps trying to look at different car statistics. But I had a really soft spot for it. I love small cars. The smaller the better, and I mean, as they get so small it becomes impractical to drive them. And the Fiat 126 was definitely bordering on the threshold of being practical. But I love small cute cars, and as I say, I was thinking about maybe I would go and buy one of these cars, but to me, cars in those days when I first got my driving license was four wheels and freedom. My parents had said, don't get a motorbike, they're dangerous, you shouldn't get one of those, but I was definitely looking at a car and trying to go out and be less constrained. But I'm not sure the Fiat 126 would have been the best car for me. I was a bit of a boy racer. I drove a little bit too fast when I was younger, and in a car that size, with how dangerous it was, there's nothing around you. I may not be around today. But the Fiat 126, it was a very simple car. It was very bare bones, very basic. It was very light. I seem to recall a friend told me he had friends at university, and apparently as a prank, a few of them got around a friend's Fiat 126 and lifted it over a fence and put it in someone's garden. And it was a sort of car that was sort of that light that you could basically do that. There was really nothing to it. One thing I didn't mention in the video but was kind of interesting is the wash wipe facility for the windscreen wipers. It was literally a button which physically was, you pressed that and it physically actuated the wash wipe. There wasn't any electrical part of it, so it wasn't any motor doing anything. It was your physical motion on the button was actually providing the pump to put the water on the screen. And it was updated to an automatic electronic one in this big sweeping update they did in 1985 that made the car look a lot more practical. It had a turning ignition that allowed you to start it in a less convoluted way. But as I say, in the early days, it was a very simple car, and it was the perfect car when it was launched in 1972 to capitalize on the 1973 fuel crisis, which I talk about incessantly in my videos because a lot of them cover the 1970s, but also because it was such a big shock on the car industry, and big gas-guzzling cars ended up being something that went the way of the dodo, and people were all looking for very fuel economical cars, and that generally meant very small cars, and the Fiat 126 was in the perfect position to capitalize on that. So when I do these videos, I go and find a whole lot of old photographs and videos and things like that. And when I was doing the bit about everything from the Fiat 124 to the Fiat 133, I thought I'd go and get a photograph of every single car. And in the process, I found this picture of possibly the coolest dashboard ever, which is from the 1970 Fiat 130. And there were a couple of other photographs that showed different dashboards, but this one is the coolest thing ever. Okay, so moving on. There are a couple of quotes that I found while I was looking into this, and I thought I'd share them with you because I just thought they were really rather priceless, but I couldn't just completely rip them off and put them in my main video. So the first one is, in theory, having the engine behind you means the noise goes that way too, but the Nicky, that's the Australian Fiat 126, wasn't fast enough to dispel its own noise. I love that idea. The second one is, the Fiat 126, in the face of some of today's hedonistic cars, almost takes on the flavour of simple and popular things like a succulent piece of fresh-baked focaccia or a beautiful frozen Peroni instead of macrobiotic salad and a diet fruit juice. I just love that idea. It's, you know, it's simple and basic, just like a basic kind of bread. I love that. I love that turn of phrase. It's very good. It's also surprising that this car could pull a caravan. In America, where I am, you know, the only things that would pull caravans or fifth wheelers or things like that are these ginormous trucks. But certainly in Britain, you would get, you know, Ford Cortinas pulling caravans and things like that. I remember a friend had I think a 1300 or a 1600 Skoda that did the same thing. But to do it with a 600cc Fiat 126 is taking the biscuit. So this caravan must have been incredibly light. And I love the practicality of it. It had a full bed, it had a stove, it had a sink, it had a fridge. It was an amazing little caravan. So the Fiat 126, it finally ends production in Italy in 1979-1980 time, after about 7 years or so, 7 or 8 years. But then it starts the production in Poland, which is going to last, well, it continues the production in Poland, but that goes on for another 20 years. And it's interesting that normally when car companies do that, they're trying to scale back production and sort of end of life the car. And yet they then start expanding sales to Australia in 1989. So who was doing that? Was it FSM of Poland was trying to push that? Was it Fiat was trying to push that? I mean, it's a 17-year-old car at this point, and it's based on 1950s technology. It's a seriously old car, and obviously they're selling it on price. It's just an odd thing to do. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, but I mean, they sold a few cars for 3 years, so that was, I guess it worked out for them. Certainly, if it was FSM, it showed their entrepreneurial spirit with doing that, and also doing all the different custom versions they did, the open top version, and particularly the version in the 1980s they did that was highly aerodynamic. It was something that looked a little bit like the Fiat Cinquecento that came after it. As I said, it took 8 years until they stopped producing it, and then another 20 years the Fiat 126 was in production. If you compare that to the Fiat 500, that ended production after only 3 years after the 126 was introduced. So for the 126 to go for another 20 years after it essentially ended production, and 11 of those years it was still being sold in Western Europe alongside the Fiat Panda, it did very, very well. And it's likely it wouldn't have lasted that long if it wasn't for the FSM production. Poland desperately needed Western money. They had workers that were paid very little, as I said in the video, and so they were able to do a very cut price car. As I said, it was the cheapest car I saw in the 1980s for just £2,500. And of course, it was a testament to the Polish workers that they were making a car that was pretty good quality. It was a good enough quality that Fiat thought that they could sell it to different markets. One thing I do try to get right in my video, I spend a lot of time on it, people may not think I do, but I do, is trying to get different names right. And hearing it back, Giovanni Michelotti, I think I said Giovanni Michelotti, and that bugs me that I didn't quite get it right, and I spent a lot of time trying to do it. But the biggest one is the Fiat Cinquecento, which I was doing that in the video, and I say it right in the video as far as you can tell, but I said it right once, And I say it, I think, 4 times in the video, but the other 3 times I said Fiat Cinquecento, which is obviously not quite right. It should be Cinquecento. So I had to take the one time it was right and then sort of copy it to all the 3 other places because of all the wonderful things you can do in audio editing of videos. So Tom Hanks has this running gag. This is relevant, mark my words, we'll get to this. It is relevant to the Fiat 126. He has this running gag where he has photographs taken. He goes and walks to different streets and then he sort of grabs the door handle of a car and someone takes a photograph of him and he says, "Hey, look at my new car." And of course it's this sort of weird, crazy car. And there's been a few times when he's seen a Fiat 126 when he's filming in Europe, and he's done that and taken a picture and it's gone viral and people have gone, "Oh look, Tom Hanks has got a Fiat 126. So apparently the city of Bielsko-Biała, I'm probably saying that wrong, that's one of the cities that did Fiat 126 production. In fact, it was the first city that did Fiat 126 production. They liked this image of Tom Hanks with the Fiat 126 so much that they actually got one prepared, a used one. They sort of did it up and made it look good. They did it especially for him, and they sent it to him in 2017, which was very nice of them and a nice little gesture. And it got auctioned off for charity in March 2022, March of this year, for $83,500 for charity. So I thought that was a nice little thing. Anyway, thought I'd mention that because all the times I was searching for the Fiat 126, all I saw was these things about Tom Hanks, and it was a nice little story that apparently he had this car for 5 years. It was serviced just a year before, so he was obviously keeping it up and looking after it. Anyway, enough of that, enough of Tom Hanks. You've had enough of me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.